Good morning. If you ask my parents or grandparents the reason for them to immigrate to America, what the primary reason was, they'll list two reasons. One is opportunity, and the two is education for their children. So naturally, I found it odd that they sent me to my first day of kindergarten not knowing a word of English. Might need this. So I sat through those first couple months of kindergarten, not understanding what people were talking about or what was happening around me, but I quickly realized that if I smiled at people, they would smile back at me. So I spent the first couple months simply smiling and not understanding much of what was happening around me. When my mom would go to parent-teacher conference, the teacher mentioned that she's really happy, she just doesn't talk a lot. And so when my mom returned, and my grandma, I grew up with my mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, multi-generational family. My grandma asked what the teacher had to say about me, and my mom responded, "Teacher kendi khoshiya par boldi nahi." Translated, the teacher says she is happy, but she does not speak English. To which my grandmother replied, "Koi nahi, Angrezi sokhiya, khushi okhiya." Translated, that's okay. Learning English is easy. Learning happy is hard. That was my first lesson in positivity at the age of 5, the importance of always smiling. And I have kept that with me in any situation I get into, no matter how comfortable or uncomfortable I am, I always show up with a smile. Along this same time, I would come home from school every afternoon, and my grandfather and brother, older brother, would be playing a game called chess. When I grew up, as I was growing up, I didn't have an opportunity to interact much with my father or my grandfather. That was culturally what was expected of young girls. You mimic what your mom is doing, and the men kind of stay in a separate area. But I would watch from afar about this game of chess, and I was immediately intrigued. I would learn about the different pieces and the values they held. The main objective of the game was to capture your opponent's king, and ironically, the king would just stand in one square the entire time, while the queen was frivolously moving all around the board, and thought it was a bit ironic. Of course, this originated in India. It was much like my house. But I also learned that the queen was the one that had the most amount of power, with the numerical number of 9, had the most amount of value, which then made her the most powerful chess piece. And for me, 6 years old, that was my first lesson in feminism. It's like, okay, I want to be a queen. I want to make sure that wherever I go, I bring immense amount of value, and knowing that that is what is going to give me power. So second lesson, value is what gives you power. It is not power that gives you value. Those first 10 years of my life, my dreams were dreamt for me. Growing up in the Indian culture, there was a very clear path that was expected of me. What I would study, what friends I would keep, what activities I was allowed to participate in. And I also understood about the arranged marriage that awaited me when I was of suitable age. Until I entered 5th grade and met a teacher by the name of Mrs. Sparks. She had us do a worksheet that would talk about our dreams. I didn't understand the question. You see, I answered it. My parents would like me to study medicine. That was what I was told. It's what my aunt did. It's what my mom did, and my other older cousins. And she would pull me aside a few weeks later and explain what the assignment actually meant. It was the first time that someone had ever asked me, "What are your dreams?" So I started understanding what that meant. And to me, dreams are passions. They're the things that bring you joy and the things that make you happy. Around that same time, I found a sport called running. At recess, we would have races, and I would beat all the boys. So I fell in love with running. It was naturally something that brought me a ton of joy. And I was allowed to participate in track and field in high school. I ran for a small high school called Ceres High School. During my junior year, I started receiving recruiting letters. And this excited me, the opportunity to maybe have the potential to run at a D1 or D2 collegiate program was exciting, and that became the new dream for me at the age of 16, until I was told by my parents that Indian girls don't run in college. So I spent the next 2 years super disappointed, hoping they would change their mind, and they never did. As I graduated, I was expected and accepted to Cal State Stanislaus, which was the local university about 15 minutes away from my parents' home. You moved out of your house when you got married and moved into the house of your husband's parents. And so I lived at home, and those first couple months were super hard. I would drive by the school, and the road called Gear Road that would get me to my classes was right by the track, and I would see people practicing. And I also just kind of wanted to take a chance on myself. So at age 18, I decided to tell my parents I was going to move out. Now, you guys might not think that is that big of a surprise, but in our culture, because at 18, we're like, yes, kids, please move out. But for that generation and in that time period, it was a big step I was taking. It didn't just mean I was moving out. It meant I was leaving my family. And for 5 years, my parents did not speak to me. Matter of fact, my entire community of Indian relatives was not allowed to speak to me because I was walking away from something. And when you do that, the punishment is that you are disowned. So I spent 5 years. I walked onto the track at Cal State Stanislaus, and the coach instantly recognized me. I said, I'd like to come out for the track team. A year had gone by when I finally had enough courage to go up and do that. I hadn't taken a step in a year and a half. I said, I want to be a walk-on. And she said, I remember who you are. And so I entered track and field at Cal State Stanislaus as a walk-on. Had a ton of success my first year. I qualified for the NCAA championship and earned a full-ride scholarship, so the rest of my education was paid for. Became a 3-time All-American and just loved the opportunity to chase my dreams. It was lonely, but it was super rewarding. At the end of my senior year, there was a professional Olympic development team that was training out in Palo Alto at Stanford. And the coach there was a man by the name of Frank Gagliano. He gave me an opportunity by inviting me to train with the Nike Farm team. 3 years into running for this man, was the first man that believed in me, believed in my potential. People believe in you when things are going really well, but finding someone that believes in your potential before you've done anything is rare. He saw the coach in me. He would pull me aside a couple years after training under him and said, have you ever thought about coaching? I had never thought about that profession at all. And I did. I took it to heart when he told me, I see something in you, and I think you can help change and inspire a ton of lives. At the same time, my college coach was getting out of coaching and moving into administration, and so she had called and kind of offered me that job. So 2 influential people in my life saw something in me, and I trusted them. In those first couple years of coaching, I went out to a leadership convention for women. Female administrators and coaches were invited to hear this whole empowerment series. And the keynote speaker, and I still have to track her down, I do not know her name, but I will never forget the impact she had on me. I've built an entire coaching career around the words that she spoke. In her keynote, she said, the 5 most powerful words you can say to someone is, how can I help you? The 4 most powerful words you can say to someone is, I believe in you. The 3 most powerful words you can say to someone is, I need you. The 2 most powerful words you can say is, thank you. And the most powerful word you can say to someone, yes. I have built my entire career around those 4 most powerful words, I believe in you. When I left that conference, I completely changed the way I was coaching. I was fairly young, so it was easy for me to change directions and just believe in my team. I saw an immense amount of success. I was coaching at the same D2 that I ran at. And we started having individuals qualifying for national championships, receiving All-American honors, qualifying for the Olympic trials, so much so that a university, Brigham Young University, reached out to me. I started having enough success that people were recognizing it on a larger scale. And so a man by the name of Ed Eyestone, who's the director of track and field and cross country sent me an email. In that same moment, my in-laws had moved back to Lehigh, so I was very familiar with Happy Valley and Utah, but there was no way this woman was going to coach at BYU and leave the Sunshine State of California. There was always, obviously, different plans. When I came to campus, there was a pull that just made me feel like I could make an impact. And that pull alone, that ability to have the chance to make a larger impact was what drew me to BYU. The only thing I had known about BYU was Jimmer. I'm yet to still actually meet him and personally thank him because he was what excited me about the university. So I took that leap of faith, I think it's been 8 years now, and showed up to Provo, Utah, and started coaching. Became the head women's cross country coach for my young women. When I first got here, I realized we needed to have an identity. And in that first year, we thought about what could it be. Threw out a bunch of different suggestions, and the one that stuck the most was BYU Run for Her. And that run for her is to run for that little girl that fell in love with the sport. You see, it's super easy to do really hard things when you do it for that little boy or little girl that fell in love, that had that dream. And so I remind and challenge you guys to always do the same thing. When you're going through hard things, think about that little girl or that little boy. And it's easy to go through struggle for that kid. So that was our identity, BYU Run for Her, hashtag it everywhere. And then we also needed to have a team culture. So what was that going to be? Faith, trust, love, built on gratitude. I've never shared how I came up with this, but it was something that I just brought to a team meeting and said, this is who we are, this is what we're going to embody, and this is how we're going to represent ourselves. Everything built on gratitude, faith, trust, love. This is how I came up with it. And all of these parts are interchangeable. You can change the mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual, but those are cups that are super important to me, and I know that they are what we have. We can't ever compromise on those 4 things. While they can be interchanged, they are non-negotiables. We started seeing a ton of success. I also identified myself as the type of leader that I wanted to be. I figured out, I had been coaching long enough to know what was important to me, and I knew that leadership is less about how you make others feel and less about how others make you feel and more about how you make others feel. That's what happens when I just try to do it without reading it. And that was the type of leader I became, or I worked hard to become. But we kind of needed an operational form. And so if I had to, and I've written this, I didn't make this next one up, but here's some quadrants, and I've gotten this wrong a lot. If you are a leader in this room, you also have gotten this wrong a lot. When you're building a team, it's easy to operate in these different quadrants. But what I found, the most successful quadrant for me was high expectations, high love. And you can see sometimes, and I've done it, high expectations, low love. That was when I first got into coaching. I lived there, and it was, fear can't be the motivator. It cannot be the motivator. It is not sustainable. It's not a sustainable method for success. Low love, low expectations, you won't get people to really show up. High love, low expectations. I sometimes operate in this space. When I don't feel like my team can handle the pressure, I tend to go in that direction. And it's super fun, but performance is suffering. You won't get the most out of your team. The place that I have found the most amount of success and that I challenge myself to be in at all times is that upper quadrant on the right. This is where miracles happen. Growth occurs at the highest level. My athletes feel fulfilled. It's the true essence of teamwork. It's about the people, not the performances. And everyone finds a way to contribute when there's high expectations matched with high levels of love. So what happened when these things started happening as BYU started becoming nationally relevant again? We go to the 2019 NCAA championships, and we narrowly miss winning a title by 6 points. Okay, 6 points is like 1.5 seconds. That's it. But we had not been at that stage yet, and so all of a sudden, people were coming up to me, other coaches, like, whoa, what is happening at BYU? Like, guys are kind of sexy. And that's not a word that was ever used before. So I took it as a compliment, like, yeah, we're doing something right. But it was because I was so firmly planted in running the team and never fading away, regardless of highs, lows, but always staying grounded and keeping the main thing, which is making sure I was investing in the people prior to the performances. We were on the verge of having a lot of wins come our way. In March, we were in Albuquerque, New Mexico, ready to line up for the indoor track and field championships. When you coach cross country, you do that in the fall, and then there's an indoor season in the winter and an outdoor season in the spring. So lots of opportunities for competition, but very, very busy. Here we are, March 2020. You guys all know the night before we were lining up to get some wins, the NCAA championship for indoor was canceled due to COVID. It was devastating to sit there and tell these women who had worked so hard for their dreams and had tasted success just a few months previously that they were going to have to go home, and I couldn't tell them when the next opportunity would arise. So I did what every good leader should do when you have a little bit of time off. I thought, all right, I got to invest in myself and find ways to get better. That fall, I had listened to a man by the name of Damon West go out and speak to Alabama's football program, Clemson's football program, and he had written a book called The Coffee Bean. I had ordered a ton of self-help books, and I added this one in there because it was short and because I had heard him speak. So naturally, I wanted to reach out to him, and I know there's some young people in here, and this means something so different at my age, but I slid into his DMs on Instagram and said, can you please get on Zoom and talk to my team about your book and just share the story? It was just a small fable, and really, there's a pot of boiling water. We all face it. It's the environment. When the environment is harsh, it's like a pot of boiling water. And he talks about three things. He talks about the carrot, the egg, and the coffee bean. When you put a carrot in a pot of boiling water, it softens because the environment around it makes it softer. When you put an egg in a pot of boiling water, it hardens because the environment makes it tough. When you put a coffee bean in a pot of boiling water, it changes the water. It transforms the environment. And I love that because I thought that's something my team can grasp. Like, in this time, let's focus on becoming better and making those around us better. I also picked up golf because I had a lot of time, and nothing stunts your growth like picking up golf in your 40s. But yeah, we came up with this. You know what we're going to do, guys? Every week I brought someone else onto Zoom to talk to my team. Where most teams just went home and said, hey, run on your own, I was making sure I was staying engaged with those women. We came up with this. We're going to win the weight. That's what we're going to do. I didn't even know what the weight was because there were no plans for if universities were going to open back up or what was going to happen, but we were going to win the weight. And that meant doing the small things. That meant giving them goals that they were still feeling like they were accomplishing something. In the fall, when they canceled the fall championships, I made a fake season, and I had all these fun names, and the girls would show up. I would make them put on uniforms. I would still write note cards. I wrote note cards to my women before every competition. I still did all of those things to make them feel like someone still believed in them in this time during the wait. This is what happened when we finally got the opportunity. In March of 2021, they hosted the 2020 National Championships, and this is what my women did that particular morning. So I will carry on. That particular morning, I had women showing up to the line, fully engaged, knowing that they had given everything in that weight, doing everything they could to make themselves a little bit better. And the result of that was a national championship. And not by a little bit, by a lot of bit. I was super proud of the stories. They all had different stories, and the one I'm going to share today is one I haven't shared before, but there was a woman on my team by the name of Whitney Orton. I pulled her in during her freshman year. I don't do this. With freshmen, I'm just like praying that they don't get a ring by spring, okay? I'm like, please just don't get married. That is my goal for you. Learn how to sleep 9 hours a night and don't get married. And come to find out, they actually sleep 9 hours a night when they do get married. So I've switched that mindset a little bit. But Whitney Orton was one of the women in 2020 that was going to line up. She had placed 7th at the NCAA championships in 2019. She had a ton of brands after her. We had an agent already in the works. Her dream was to run professionally. And that's a unique dream for a girl at BYU. So I was invested in that dream. But prior to this championship, she sustained an injury. She was kind of like the Taysom Hill of BYU women's cross country. She had 9 bone stress injuries in her 5.5 years, 6 years at BYU. And so she came to me 10 days before this race and said, I don't want to get on the line. And I'm like, whoa, why? Well, everyone has been winning the weight but me. I was injured in the weight. And I thought about that, and my only response was, I know you're not at your best, but I need you to line up and give your best. Because even when you're not at your best, you can still give your best. And I asked her to do that selfishly for me and for our team. She was worried that if she lined up and didn't perform her best, she would continue to lose those opportunities to run professionally. I wish that video would have showed, but she pushed that race from the gun, and at the very end, at the final hill, she faltered to 17th place, which is still very impressive. But you see, the opportunities to run professionally in running are a lot different than other sports. You almost have to be a national champion to get a nice contract out of college. And so she saw 16 women pass her by on that final hill, and 2 of them were her teammates. Now, we still got the team win. But she was probably one of the women here, while she's smiling, she was super sad on the inside. So I told her, hey, in 3 months, we have outdoor track and field. You can go win a title, and the dream still lives. We lined up for that national championship in June at Hayward Field in Oregon. And the pressure was so high on her, she knew what she had to do. And I always say we're focusing on the process, not the outcome. It's hard to live that when you know what the outcome entails. She took the lead, which was not. It's always plan the race and race your plan. We planned the race. She didn't race the plan because the gun went off and she got so excited she was in the lead and she was pushing the pace. 4 laps in, there was eight to go because it was a 5K, so 12 laps on the track. 1 mile in, I bent my head down and said, this is not going to end well. She ended up taking last place in that race of 24 women. All hopes to go professional were gone. Nike, Adidas, On, Hoka, none of them. Crickets after that race. Luckily, because of COVID, we had a fall season. She had no plans. She had already graduated. She had no plans to come back for fall. But I said to her, Whitney, why don't you come back for an extra season? You got one more chance. Don't leave eligibility on the table. You can still have a chance to be a national champion. Begrudgingly, she showed up to cross-country camp in August, wanting no part of the team. You know the people that are somewhere and you know they don't want to be there? Sometimes you can hide it, like we all have obligations. She did not hide it that entire week. We were at dinner on Main Street in Park City, and I walked into a bookstore, and there was a bunch of books, and one of them just stood out to me. It had the word believe on it. So I bought that book, and inside it had a ton of quotes, and I wrote in every single quote something about her and believing in her. I gave that book to her that Friday. She still was not happy, but what she took from that is she was going to be grateful for the opportunity. Regardless of the outcome, she was going to be grateful. So every time we raced that fall, she came up to me and gave me a hug and said, I'm grateful for you. And I thought, wow, this is a new woman. And then we showed up to Tallahassee, Florida in November at the national championship. Again, I planned the race and gave her the race plan, and this time she raced the plan. She would become the first woman at BYU to win a national championship. I was so proud of that moment, not because of that national championship, because she didn't give up on her dreams, yes, but mostly who she became in those 3 months when trials were placed before her, Who she became in that moment and the woman she became would not have been possible if she didn't take a chance and come back for those 3 months. And while the win the weight looked different for her, it still ended up working out. And in that moment, after having these wins, started changing the way how I felt about winning. You see, there's 25,000 Division I, Division II, Division III coaches, and all of them think the pinnacle of success is getting a national trophy. And I can tell you as a woman who's gotten one that it isn't about what you accomplish. It's about what you inspire others to do. So I had to figure out what was that going to be. I was invited to a little meet and greet with the who's who of track and field after one of the track meets. And UC BYU coaches don't really get invited to bars, but I was. And so I went to mingle. And there were two directors of track and field, one from the University of Texas and one from the University of Oregon. Super influential and most successful and highest paid coaches in the country. And they said to me, "Hey, Diljeet, like, what's next?" You see, that's the other thing. In this arena, when you win, people always think there's something else. Like, your wins just open doors for more money, a bigger job. And like, what do you mean? What's next? Like, well, where do you want to go? What job? You're a female. You've won a national championship, and you're a minority. You are an AD's dream. And I thought to myself, like, no, I need to figure out what my legacy is going to be. And they didn't understand that. You see, their legacy is success and winning. But I needed mine to be a little bit bigger than that. The story that I want to leave behind for others to tell doesn't have to do with money or material things, but of character, conviction, and compassion. I needed to figure out what that was. You see, as I walked away after holding that big national championship trophy, I envisioned it to make me feel and turn me into something different, and it didn't. I went back into that tent, and I lifted it up again, thinking I would get that feeling, and it wasn't. It's never been about the win. And so I had to figure out what it was for me. Ironically, at this same time, Nike had started reaching out to me. They wanted to partner about helping change what it looks like for girls in sport, fixing the gender and pay gaps that exist because of just the late entry for women into sport. And they asked me to come reshape the next 50 years of sport with them. So that was very exciting for me. And at the same time, we started this Girl Dad camp at BYU, where with an opportunity to just empower these girls, but also their dads. These are meaningful and impactful things to me. They're the things that are more important than chasing the wins. While I'm still so competitive and I want to win a lot more of those titles because winning is contagious and the best drug in the world. However, it's got to be more than that. I also became a mental health advocate, realizing the change and the shift in what our youth are and I wouldn't even say youth, society as a whole, the mental health crisis that exists. So founded a company called Status and going to work on, my team's been using it all year, but going to work on helping people acknowledge, recognize, be informed, and empower them to transform so they can be the best versions of themselves and perform in life and also in sport. So the Taylor 10, it's not on a slideshow because technology is not my strong suit, but here's my top 10, my Taylor's top 10. Number 1, smile. Number 2, value equals power. Number 3, stay loyal to your dreams and your passions. Number 4, surround yourself with people that believe in you and that believe in your potential. And then turn around and be that someone for someone else. When I walk into a recruit's house, I don't talk about what I'm going to help them accomplish or the wins that they're going to get. I tell them this one thing. In your life, you're going to have 5 people. Every single one of you can list 5 people that have changed the trajectory of your life. I want to be in your 5. That is the promise I make to them when I sit in their home. Your why is that little boy or girl. That's your story and that's your why, and remember and go back to that place. Number 6, everything you build on gratitude. It should be the entry point to all we do and all we accomplish. Number 7, high expectations, high love at all times. Transform the environment around you, much like the coffee bean. Number 9, win the weight. Win your weight. And the most important one that I think Casey Baugh and Dave Jensen are doing an amazing job at. Learn your legacy language. Figure out what that is. Super grateful for you guys today. I hope I inspired you in some way. Thank you.